My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
This episode is brought to you by La Quinta by Wyndham. Your work can take you all over the place, like Texas. You've never been, but it's going to be great because you're staying at La Quinta by Wyndham. Their free Bright Side breakfast will give you energy for the day ahead. And after, you can unwind using their free high-speed Wi-Fi. Tonight, La Quinta. Tomorrow, you shine. Book your stay today at lq.com.
This is Optimal Finance Daily. Should you max out your 401k earlier in the year? By Nick Maggiulli of dollarsandData.com. And I'm your host and personal finance enthusiast, Diana Merriam. I'm going to jump right into our next post as we optimize your life. Should you max out your 401k earlier in the year? By Nick Maggiulli of dollarsandData.com. One of the most common questions I get asked by readers is, should I max out my 401k earlier in the year or just contribute normally to max it out by year end? Though I'm not the biggest fan of maxing out your 401k, especially for young, aggressive savers, there's some evidence that maxing out earlier in the year can provide some benefit over maxing out by year end. Why is this true? Because markets tend to go up. And since markets tend to go up, there's a slight advantage to getting your money into the market sooner rather than later. Of course, over a 1-year period, the difference between doing all of your contributions in January, max early, and doing contributions throughout the year, average in, will be quite small, even when investing in a 100% US stock portfolio. In fact, since 1978, when the 401k was first introduced, the biggest difference between maxing early and averaging in to a 100% US stock portfolio over 1 year was about 13 to 15%. This means that for a $20,000 contribution, choosing one strategy over the other could have netted you as much as $2,000 to $3,000. But that's only in the most extreme years. Typically, the amount of outperformance you get by following one of these strategies for a year is under $1,000, or about 5% of total contributions. If you were to look at the distribution of how much max early outperforms average in over each 1-year period since 1978, you could see more clearly that this distribution is somewhat symmetrical, meaning that in some years, max early outperforms, and in some years, average in outperforms. Max early had a slight edge over average in across all 1-year periods since 1978. To be more precise, the max early strategy outperforms by $700 in a typical year. Long story short, if you're deciding whether to max out your 401k early for just 1 year, it doesn't really matter what you do. Yes, statistically, maxing early should provide a slight advantage, but that advantage isn't all that big in the grand scheme of things. So when does maxing your 401k earlier in the year actually matter? When does maxing out your 401k early actually matter? Maxing out your 401k earlier in the year can make a bigger difference if you do it for multiple years in a row. Though 1 year won't make a difference to your financial plan, the data suggests that doing this for many years can have a sizable impact. For example, imagine we compare the max early strategy and the average in strategy for 10 years in a row. So each year, for 10 years, max early would contribute $20,000 in January, while average in contributed $1,667 each month for 12 months. After running this simulation and comparing the performance between these two strategies for each 10-year period since 1978, there is a clear winner. Over a 10-year time frame, max early really pays off. In absolute terms, the typical performance difference is $11,500 in favor of max early, or about 4 to 5% of total contributions. In the grand scheme of things, this still isn't a ton of money, but it's not negligible either. After examining both the 10-year simulations and the 1-year simulations, a pattern emerges. The typical outperformance of max early over average in is about 5% of total contributions. This is a rough approximation of what you should expect if you follow this strategy for any number of years. So, if you were to max out your 401k earlier in the year for 20 years at an annual contribution of $20,000, you should expect to have about 5% more than if you didn't max early. On $400,000 in contributions over 20 years, that means an extra 20 grand. I ran the numbers as a sanity check, and the median outperformance of max early for every 20-year period since 1978 was $22,000, a little above 5% of total contributions. While it's nice that the empirical evidence matches the theory, we haven't addressed the elephant in the room. Is this strategy even feasible? Is maxing out your 401k earlier in the year feasible? While maxing out your 401k earlier in the year could provide you with some benefit, the number of households that could do this with ease is quite small. Why? Because to max out your 401k in the first month of the year would require $20,500 in contributions over 2 paychecks. That means that this strategy is limited to someone making at least $240 grand a year. Of course, if you make less than this, you could still max out over the first 2 to 3 months of the year. But the benefit would be smaller than the 5% from earlier. Nevertheless, just because this strategy isn't feasible for most people with a 401k, this doesn't imply that it isn't feasible for other retirement accounts. For example, if you were to max out your Roth IRA by contributing $7,000 in January instead of throughout the year, your expected benefit would be about $350, or 5% of $7,000 in a typical year. Yeah, $300 isn't a lot, but do that every year and it can add up over time. Whether or not you choose to max out one of your retirement accounts earlier in the year is up to you. Though I don't see a huge benefit in doing so, if you're someone who needs every extra dollar you can get, then maxing early should help. This is especially true if you max out early over many years in a row. The longer you follow the max early strategy, the higher the likelihood of absolute outperformance. Note, I've had a lot of people comment that many 401k plans will not match your contributions throughout the rest of the year. That is, there's no true-up provision if you decide to max early. If this is the case, then you will probably lose more money by not getting your full match than what you gain by being in the market earlier in time. Ask your employer before maxing early, as this could end up costing you more money than it makes you. Either way, don't stress yourself out over this decision. The benefit of doing so isn't worth the mental cost. You just listened to the post titled, "Should You Max Out Your 401k Earlier in the Year?" by Nick Maggiulli of dollarsandData.com. And I'll be right back with my commentary. Buy low, sell high. Buy low, sell high. It's a simple concept, but not necessarily an easy concept. Right now, high interest rates have crushed the real estate market. Prices are falling and properties are available at a discount, which means F.I.R.E believes now is the time to expand the F.I.R.E flagship fund's billion-dollar real estate portfolio. You can add the F.I.R.E flagship fund to your portfolio in minutes by visiting fundrise.com/OFD. That's FUNDRISE.com/OFD. RISE.com/OFD. Carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the FundRise flagship fund before investing. This and other information can be found in the fund's prospectus at fundrise.com/OFD. This is a paid advertisement.
With supply chains becoming more complex, you need to stay on top of the latest logistics developments. So if you work with logistics, you need the Beyond the Box podcast from Maersk. It's the easy way to keep up to date with everything from digital disruption in logistics to the need for supply chain resilience in today's market. Find out more and keep ahead of the game with the Beyond the Box podcast on logistics insights at maersk.com/insights.
This article reminds me of the perils of over-optimization. While I understand that the name of this podcast is Optimal Finance Daily, maybe we should start calling it Optimal Finance While Keeping Your Sanity Daily. There are lots of little ways we can squeeze out a tiny bit more return out of our investments. But I tend to disregard most things that would cause me to mess around with the automation I've set up. For example, I invest in total market low-fee index funds. One time, a listener wrote to me to ask why I wouldn't move all of my money over to a different index fund that had an expense ratio that was 0.01% less. Another asked me why I wouldn't move my emergency fund every year to a bank that was offering an interest rate that was 0.5 percentage point higher than my current bank. My answer to both of those questions is that I'm lazy and the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Every time I mess with my setup, I'm adding complexity for very little return. I'm adding another account I need to keep track of, or I'm fussing with my money without much benefit. As the father of index funds, Jack Bogle, once said, quote, "Don't do something, just stand there." And that's another edition of Optimal Finance Daily. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back with you tomorrow for another post. So I'll see you there where your optimal life awaits.